Welcome to the Big Movement Podcast. If you're ready to create results and make huge strides in your business, finances, personal development, and health, then you're in the right place. Pushing past excuses and powering through procrastination can be a challenge alone. Here, you'll get the support, tools, and knowledge you need to get to the level you desire in your business and life. Let's get started with your host, Byron Ingram.
And welcome to another episode of the Big Movement Podcast. Today we have a special guest. We have Andi Wickman, who is a personality-based marketing strategist who helps business owners go from unknown to influential by leveraging their unique personality. She helps them stand out and works with them to create and target a message that will reach and resonate with their ideal customers. So let's give a warm welcome to Andi. So Andi, welcome.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here with you.
I'm glad that you're here. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So you gave an awesome intro. And I could kind of go backwards and tell you about how I even got to this point. So I was in corporate finance for, 15 years, which is really funny because it's a very corporate world, and I'm not a corporate person. But living in San Francisco, everything is expensive, so you just I stuck with it. And I moved my way up, and it was great. And then I realized at one point, I'll tell you one story that happened to me. I was coming off the train, and there were, hundreds of people coming up the platform, up the stairs onto the street in San Francisco, and there was a homeless man there screaming at us and basically calling us slaves, saying, "You guys are just corporate slaves. Look at you and your laptops, and you don't have time for your families, and you're on your phones." And he just starts screaming on this stuff. And everyone, of course, walks right by, and I'm walking by, and it just hit me. It's like, I don't have time for my kids. I don't have time for my husband. I don't have time for myself. And I just had this moment where it was about a 5-minute walk to my office, and I was like, I just need to turn around. I'm done. This guy spoke something to me, and it hit me. I didn't turn around and leave. I went to work, but the seed was planted for me.
Right.
And I realized I needed something more in my life. So a long story short, at that point, I decided to start an olive oil brokerage company, which I loved. And that was great. And then I had my second kid, and I didn't really have the passion for it anymore. And so I became a life coach. So I was a certified life coach helping moms find balance in their life, which I look back on and laugh because there's really no such thing as balance as a mom,
Right.
especially a working mom. So as I was a life coach and working with my clients who were moms, a lot of them, once they started kind of dealing with a lot of old wounds, decided that they were going to start businesses. I can't really understand the evolution of how this happened with maybe 6 of my clients, which is really interesting. So I started helping them build businesses. And that is where I lit up. I felt so amazing when I was on the phone with them talking about strategy and marketing. And so I just then threw myself into learning everything that I could about marketing and social media and SEO and everything. And then here I am, 3 years later, doing business coaching.
Oh, excellent. It's really interesting how we all come across that one defining moment that it's pivotal. It shifts where you're going. I've been on the train in San Francisco, so I can understand that how everyone's just in that focus mode, like, whatever, because you're just in that business grind. But for you to actually pay attention to a message where you think about it, the vast majority of people are like, whatever, like, that guy's nuts. And you're like, interesting.
Yep. I'm like, he's on to something.
Right. Because if you think about it, of how often we end up doing things for the wrong reasons, like, as you mentioned there, that because San Francisco is expensive, that you were doing this. It was fueling that ability to live there, but that fulfillment inside, it just wasn't there after a while.
Right. And it's so interesting because I still see the majority of my friends are in corporate in San Francisco or New York. And yeah, they're happy for the most part. They make money, they're able to travel. But if you ask them, like, are they really happy? The majority of them would say no. But how things are done, sadly. And I had to break out of that mold, and I work with people every day who are breaking out of that mold, who are actually willing to listen to those signs and listen to those messages. I mean, I wasn't aware that I was actually open to listening to a message, but some part of me was open.
Right.
And it's hard because we're so busy all the time, and we often are just closed off without really meaning to. We're closed off to so many of our passions and our likes, and it's a very interesting dynamic that we have in this society, for sure.
Oh, definitely. Because if you think about it, the definition of happiness for a lot of people ends up shifting because we start defining our happiness like, oh, well, you have the money to go on the trips, you're taking the vacations, you're going out to eat the restaurants you want to go to, all these things where you're going through the emotions. But then if you look under the surface, how many people, when it comes to, let's say, a Monday morning, it's like, oh, man, it's Monday. Mm-hmm. So they repeat this cycle over and over. And over time, it starts having that detrimental effect where they might be successful in their job, but when they're looking at it, sometimes each and every day it's a struggle just to get out of bed because they know that they're having to do things they don't really enjoy at a deep level.
Yeah. So. Yeah, it's so true. And if you kind of flip it and talk about business owners, we have struggles. It's not easy owning a business, but I find that the majority of my network and my clients are also into personal development. Right. And I don't know why that is, but it's really an interesting thing because if you're in a personal development, most likely you're going to want that freedom. And then you want that freedom so bad and you kind of figure out that path, and it's almost always entrepreneurship. Right.
Well, it's a fascinating thing you bring up personal development because if you think about it, there's that expression, like attracts like. So because you understand what is it that you want in life, what is it that you're going for, the energy you're putting out into the world, you're going to attract the people who are willing to invest in themselves. They're not like, oh, well, why would I want to go to a seminar? Why would I want to read a book on how to do whatever? Because it's a thought process. It's that mentality that when you start looking at the people who are most successful in life, they all invest in different degrees into personal development.
Yeah.
And it's just a critical component.
It is. It's so interesting to me. I love it.
Right. Exactly. So now you switched gears into marketing and helping your clients build businesses. Right. What was that shift like? Because here it is, you're going from being, the life coach to all these people, and suddenly you close the door one day on life coaching and ta-da, I'm going to help you grow your business.
Well, it didn't quite work out like that. I was doing both because I had, a book of clients, but it is interesting because since I am a certified life coach, I learned how to coach in a way that is it's a co-relationship, and so when I coach as a business coach, it's still like, I'm not necessarily just teaching you. I'm like, this is a relationship between the two of us. We go back and forth. The highest good is, I want you to have the highest good. My goal is for the client. So that I carry over from life coaching. But a lot of the life coaching that I did and I was trained in is not to talk about me. And when I came into business coaching, I realized that there are thousands of business coaches doing the same thing that I do. So how am I going to stand out? So that was a really interesting thing because, you talk about the benefits and you get into a little bit more of the marketing. So what are the benefits and what's my unique selling point? And then how do you incorporate your personality into that to get people to, we've all heard this 100 times, but the know, like, and trust factor. How is anybody going to actually like me if I'm just this cookie cutter coach? So, and that's part of the stuff I do with my clients now. Like, how do you actually leverage your personality into your brand? Because we are our brands.
Right. Exactly. That's so critical that you mentioned that. That we are a brand. Because sometimes people forget about everything they do everything they say is a reflection of that, especially for that business owner who's a solopreneur, or, it's a business that's not startup, because the business itself hasn't had the time to develop a separate identity.
Right.
And, you think about, like, right now, ironically, as we're recording this, it's the middle of the presidential election season. So how many people, they're posting all sorts of stuff, and they're offending who knows how many potential clients.
Yes. Yes, it is true. You definitely have to be careful on how you use your personality, because let's face it, not everybody wants to know about what you had for dinner last night or what your political view is, unless you're actually, most people want to know how they benefit from it, right? So there's this idea of like entertaining while educating.
Right.
So, that's a part of your personality. If you're an entertainer or you want to make people laugh and use humor, that is a perfect example of how to leverage your personality. But it's the educating piece. So, again, people want to know what they get out of it. They want to know your personality. They want to like you, but you have to give them something. Again, a picture of your mashed potatoes last night, I don't really care about, because it's just going to make me hungry and make me mad that I don't have that in front of me. So, there is a fine line, and you're right. There's a lot of people who post controversial things, and I'm all for it when it comes to business, but not when it comes to your political posts.
Right. Because when you think about attracting those ideal clients, where so many people miss the boat on is that, you might say that, I want to market to people that live in a certain area. They make X amount of dollars per month and so forth. But where people sometimes miss the point of it is that individuals have different ideological views, where in business, you might think, like, well, they must follow these principles because I do. Like, well, no, they're completely opposite there because of a particular background. But what people fail to realize is that when someone is, let's say they're posting spiteful comments, and then suddenly it's like, well, now that puts that person on defense, like, oh my gosh, now there's a barrier that's created. So once November 8th is passed, guess what people have to do? Try to cross that bridge where they just blew it up.
Yeah, and you're so right, but there are a lot of people who don't care. They just don't care. And I think that's extremely dangerous. But, and they probably lost a lot of, you're probably the same way as me. I've defriended people, not just because of politics, but because of something they said that just I did not agree with, and how they treated people on social media. It happens a lot, and I don't understand why, but it happens a lot. There's a lot of competition. There's a lot of negativity, and I could have worked with that person at some point in the future, but they're off my list. They're off my radar because of how they handled themselves. So you have to be really careful.
Right. And it's just something that people have to look at, that until a business grows beyond a certain point, that person's automatically tied to it. But even after a business reaches a certain scale of it, you're still directly attached to it. You think about, for example, let's use Tesla. No matter which way, someone thinks about the vehicles and so forth, people are always going to associate Elon Musk with it because he created the company.
Yes.
So there's always that attachment. Even if you think about Apple, no matter who's running the company, at least for the next several years, people are still going to be thinking about, well, what would Steve Jobs have done?
Exactly. Yeah.
Because of the direct impact. So there's this long-lasting effect. It doesn't matter how big the company is, people still associate a person with it, because we want to have a personal connection with a brand versus they see this amalgamous logo and they want to connect with this. You think about Starbucks in terms of that personal relationship.
Yeah.
Now, granted, people, some people might not know who the CEO is, but they're going to know who that local barista is. Exactly. They're going in there. So there's always that human interaction people have to think about when it comes to business.
Oh, yeah. I love that. And it's so true. And you put that in such a good way, because it is something that it's a human connection.
Right.
And that's what people nowadays more than before, I would argue, because of all the screens that we have. And there is a need to connect on a human level with people. And it is so important to get out from behind the screen and get out from behind the brand somehow. You could still, and that's, again, why I teach how to leverage your personality, because they want to see you. They want to know what your story is. They want to know what you've learned. They want to know your ups and downs. People want to see you on top of the mountain, but they also want, declaring your victory, but they also want to see how you climbed on all fours to get up that mountain. Because most likely they're either in the bottom of the mountain climbing up or in the middle struggling. So they want to know, like, how did you get there? What did you do to get there? And what are those things that you've learned while getting there that I could use in my own life and for my own business?
Right, exactly, because it's the story of the struggle that people are able to connect with. Because regardless of where you are on it, someone can say, oh my gosh, that's just where I am right now, or I know that feeling. I was just there not too long ago. So now there's a bond where it's a lot different than the person who just says, hey, learn my 7-step system to do blank, and they've never told their story.
Totally. Yeah. And so, it's a perfect segue for what I wanted to talk about next, which is this knowing your story, connecting with your story is all about knowing who you are and your core story, right? Like and this is something that often gets overlooked. And when clients come to me and start working with me, I think they're a little shocked that I go into this immediately, because this is kind of not boring, but people think they know what their mission in the world is, or they think they know their core story. And then I start asking them, and it's just kind of like they freeze. And so this is something that, in order for you to know your brand, you have to be self-aware. You have to know who you are and have to connect with your core story so you could share it.
Right.
So some of those things is like really knowing your mission, knowing what you stand for,
right,
knowing what you stand against, your beliefs, your values, what you like, what you don't like really getting deep. And it's funny because a lot of people have done the ideal client exercise, because obviously you have to know who your ideal client is. But what I think is really important, and what I do on myself every, 6 months, I would say, is I take the ideal client exercise that I created for my group, my private Facebook group, but I do it on myself. So It's really, it's a fun exercise for me, but, it's really getting into my head. Like what keeps me up at night? What do I believe in? Why did I start my business? If I could, if I got $10,000 tomorrow and I had 2 weeks to travel, where would I go?
Right.
What am I insecure or uncertain about? What are my financial stresses? Where do I want to be in 6 months from now? Things like that.
Right. And you mentioned something that's very critical in this process. It's the why you're doing it.
Yeah.
And so many people, when it comes to business, it's not really clear that people might do it for the wrong reasons. Like, oh, I heard you could make a lot of money at this, so I figured, why not?
Yep.
And you can see it in their messaging,
Oh,
where it's
yeah.
not sincere.
Yeah, and it's hard on Facebook, being on Facebook, because you see people doing well and you want to copy it.
Right.
And, I don't blame them. When I first started off, I saw there were a few business coaches that were just killing it, who had a huge following, and I'd look at them like, wow, what are they doing? Like, I want that. I want what they have.
Right.
And I think every business starts off like that, where you model yourself on somebody you admire. But then you realize you're just doing kind of what they're doing with your little spin on it, but it's not getting any engagement. And so it's funny because people do that all the time, and they wonder why they're not getting any clients or getting people to like their Facebook posts or anything. And it's because it's not them. It's
Right.
not their voice. It's somebody else's voice that they're just trying to repackage, which never works. ever.
Right.
But so many people do it. And I get it. It's the shiny object syndrome, right? We all want what somebody else has.
Right.
So that's why this knowing who you are, knowing your core story is so important, because without it, you're just going to keep copying people and never get anywhere and never feel good about yourself because you don't even know who you are or why you're doing what you're doing.
Well, it's not only that. You have to go beyond that phase, because that you think about it, when someone decides upon what they are going to do in terms of a business, the first stage, it's obviously modeling, because you want to get to success quickly. So you look at what out there is working. But where most people stop is, they think of modeling. I'm going to copy everything this person does. Well, no, you want to use it as a framework of
exactly.
Because success leaves clues. So, this person, they're posting 7 times a day. Well, maybe I should post 7 times a day.
Right.
Oh, they're using images more than just plain text updates. Okay, I should use images. Those are the things that people should be doing, not just, they shared a quote by, Salvador Dali, so I'm going to share the exact same quote.
Yeah, right. Yep. It's interesting. That doesn't work.
Right.
But the first part of what you're saying does. And I think that's why it's important to model and educate yourself and follow people who are actually teaching something, because there are, ways to leverage social media in your favor. Knowing something like, how pictures increase engagement. Live video gets the highest engagement, then pictures, then text, knowing that Facebook hates external links, things like that, like educating yourself and knowing the formula, which, a good formula is a personal story, adding value, and a call to action. But seeing that and modeling that in somebody you admire is huge.
Right. Oh, definitely. And I think out of the 3 things you just mentioned there, a lot of people, they gain that clarity on that personal story. It's like, oh yeah, I have a great story, but it has to be refined. It has to be compelling, not like, because you think about the world we live in, there's so much storytelling. There's hundreds of channels where there's TV programs that people are used to seeing stories. People are looking at movies or reading books. There's so much out there. There's a story being told. And if it's not compelling, it doesn't make an impact.
Right. And that's why it's so important to know who you're talking to and know what they actually struggle with and what they want to know about.
Right. Because then your messaging is going to fit who they are. And that's what you really have to focus in on. So now, obviously, knowing who you are is really important. There's that core story. You mentioned that, you have that ideal client checklist there.
Yes.
What is it that people should be looking for when it comes to knowing who their ideal client is? Because obviously there's some people out there who might say, well, my product or service can help everybody.
Right. And it most likely can. But you're never going to get it in front of everybody. As much as you want to, you're not. So the idea is that you pick your ideal client avatar. You create this person. It could be based on somebody you know. It could just be in your head. So the idea is that you get as specific as possible, so you know everything that this person is thinking, everything that goes on in this person's head, every struggle. So I could kind of give you the gist of what an ideal client exercise looks like. And again, you could go on my Facebook group. It's 4th Floor to the Penthouse, and it's a free document I have. So the idea is that you create a person, right? So age, sex, occupation, what do they do for a living, where do they live, married, do they have kids, what do they do on the weekends, what does he or she do on a random Tuesday night if they're free, what blogs, magazines do they read. This one is an interesting one. Like, who do they follow on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter? Who are those people that whenever they post, they're just like, I got to read everything, even if it's 2 pages. I have to read what they write. What do they believe in? What keeps them up at night? again, some of the stuff we talked about on ourselves, it's important to project out. So, why did they start a business if they have a business? Knowing who they surround themselves with, kind of describe their tribe, so to speak. What are the biggest financial stresses? What are biggest life stresses? What are biggest relationship stresses? Where do they want to be in 6 months? Spiritual level, where are they on a spiritual level or intellectual level? I mean, I could go on and on,
right.
But the idea is that not only do you get into the physical aspect of this person, but you get into the psychology of them.
Right. And that's so important that we dive into the psychological aspects, because when you think about it, until you physically meet somebody, obviously, you look at like how old somebody is, where they're located, those macro level demographics. But what really becomes the defining factor is, things like who they follow online, what movies they like to watch, what books they like to read, because that's going to start giving you idea in terms of the language you should be using to communicate with them.
And then knowing where to find them.
Right.
Because that is also a really, really hard thing to do. Do they go to yoga classes? Do they, physically, where do you find them? So you could put up flyers and send mailers to them. And then, where online do you find them?
Right, exactly. Because when you look at things online, with the variety of social media channels out there, you'll have people that will say, well, you should be everywhere. But in reality, do you? Right. So it's...
No.
Yeah, exactly. Because you have 24 hours in the day. And you want to do something other than post social media updates on, a gazillion different networks all day long. Right.
It's true. So knowing where they are and finding... the most engagements are in Facebook groups and Instagram right now. Twitter is still huge. But the Facebook groups, because you actually already know who your people are. So the key in the Facebook groups, I would say, is in the morning, show up and serve. So that means when people are posting questions or, they have some posts in there that you think they need help with, you go in and you serve them for free, obviously. But with the idea that you're building a relationship and you're helping them. So you do that for maybe 15, 20 minutes in 3 or 4 groups that, where your ideal clients hang out. And then in the afternoon or around lunchtime, you go in with your own value post. So make sure it's around your brand, your main brand. So sharing a personal story with some value, or just educating, but trying to be somewhat entertaining, because there's so many people in these groups who are trying to educate and it's boring as hell. So kind of trying to stand out a little bit, but then in the evening doing something where you're not necessarily promoting yourself, but asking them for something. So you've already built up a relationship throughout the day. And then the evening around dinner time, you ask them to check out your latest webinar, or ask them to, again, you have to follow the rules of the group.
Right, naturally.
But, invite them to something that you're doing. That's cool.
Right. It's really important you do that. So now, you mentioned Facebook groups, and obviously when you look at Facebook, there's tons of them out there. How does someone narrow it down to find the groups that actually make sense for them?
Yeah, it's hard. So knowing who your ideal clients are, and then knowing who you actually want to hang out with. Again, this isn't in person, but knowing if it's a stiff group where everybody is just uptight, most likely you're not going to want to be in that group. So, if you like the leader of the group, the administrator, and if they are, they appeal to you somehow, most likely they'll appeal the same type of people to them in that group. So finding groups that have a lot of engagement, where people ask questions, support each other, try to lift each other up while lifting themselves up is huge. So these are things that a positive vibe in the group. And you could tell by reading a description, and you could join the group. And if you don't like the vibe in there, then you could obviously get out. But definitely picking only a few of these groups to engage in often is really important. So I would say 3 or 4.
Right. And that's a great solid number because you want to truly be active in it, not just show up and post like, hi, bye from me, see you later. You don't want to do that.
Right. And that so many people do. They post and run. And then, some of these groups on Fridays or Thursdays, they have a specific day where you could share your social, like your Facebook group, or you could share a promo, and you get like 75 to 100 posts on that one post, and you've never heard of that person. You're like, okay, right. So, there's this whole post and run attitude that is not going to get anybody clients. It's all about the relationships that you build.
Right, exactly. Relationships are everything when it comes to marketing online. Now, obviously, when you're doing this, you need to have something that makes you unique. And, that's the USP, that unique selling proposition.
Yep.
How is it that you really craft one that makes people go, wow, that's pretty darn cool?
Right. That is definitely a difficult thing, and people struggle with that all the time. And I'm not going to lie, I struggled with it. It took me a really, really long time to kind of sort out like who I wanted to work with, what I offered, all of that. So, part of it is like sitting down with yourself and getting really, really clear on all the benefits that you offer. So again, you have to write out the benefits of working with you. And it's a hard thing to start with doing, but kind of brain dump everything and then write out all of your strengths and weaknesses, and then kind of craft a unique message. So, let's not lie. It's boring if somebody just says, I'm a stylist. I mean, no offense to anybody, but it's kind of boring. Nobody, right. Like, that's not unique. There's a lot of stylists. So you want to get the person on the other end to kind of lean in, to be intrigued, to want to know more, to create. So you have to create some kind of message that gets people excited. So there are ways to do this. And one is, one of my favorite ways to do it is step one, I would say, is create some kind of ideal client description. So an example is I work or I assist blank. So be specific and try not to use adjectives, use census data, right? So an example is I work with new mothers. That's pretty clear. And then step 2 would be outline the challenge they face. Now this is a piece that is huge. We could think that we know what the challenge is for them based on how we created our ideal client exercise and our ideal client avatar, but you have to ask them. You have to get in front of people and ask. So you could create a 5-question survey and you ask people what their biggest problems are. So for step 2 would be outline the challenge they face. So who are struggling with blank. So in my example, they're struggling with weight issues after having a baby. And then the last step is kind of create a solution. Try to make it a little sexy if you can. So you help them, with something. So be specific, maybe show a benefit or two. So I help them, let's say, lose 15 pounds in 30 days so they could feel, vibrant, healthy, and confident and enjoy their life with a baby. Right? So putting that all together, if I could remember what I just said, but it's I work with new mothers who struggle with weight issues after having a baby, lose 15 pounds in 30 days so they could feel vibrant, confident, and enjoy life with their baby.
Right. And that's so critical because when the positioning statement is it's actually clear, then it's easier to develop all the marketing around it because now you know who it is that you are helping and how you're going to help them versus, hey, just come on over. We'll see what we can do for you.
Yeah, right. And you could put it in all the bios that you ever do.
Right.
And,
exactly.
There's so many people out there who say, oh, I'm just a business coach, or I'm just a coach for new moms, or I'm a stylist. It's like, okay, that's awesome. I'm going to move on to the next person.
Right. Exactly. Because where this really comes into play is obviously when you're getting into that personality-based marketing, because obviously the USP you develop has to resonate with the right personality and also has to resonate with your personality. It can't be something like, oh, I help people become more social, and you don't like to say more than 2 words together in one time.
Oh my gosh. Yes, I love that. There's a lot of that. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I mean, that also goes to you have to teach what you know.
Right.
If, those people, we'll leave it at that. You have to teach what you know.
Right. That is a very deep rabbit hole. We just can't go down there this episode. In a future one,
that's another podcast.
Right, exactly. Definitely. But this one's like, okay, we're just going to put all coming soon on that rabbit hole
right?
later.
Totally.
Right.
Yeah, but no, the personality thing is hard. It is something that I have spent a long time actually learning and becoming an expert in. If I could call myself an expert in it, I don't know if I can yet, but I'm close to mastering it because it is interesting. So I just want to share one story with you about this. So focusing on humor is my favorite way to use personality in marketing. So a perfect example of this is Allstate Insurance. They created this character called Mayhem. And Mayhem goes around and just fucks shit up. And has bruises all over him, and it's funny. The first time I watched this commercial, I laughed so hard, and I forgot exactly why I was laughing. I didn't know what this commercial was for. And then I kept watching. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is insurance. How did they just make insurance funny?
Right.
That does not happen very often. And they managed to do it through humor. And I would encourage people to be more like Allstate. Come up with something that educates, but that's entertaining. It doesn't have to be, that extreme. But people love to laugh and smile. They remember you for a long time after they're done reading or watching. So it somehow humor is that thing that crosses cultures and age demographics, because humor is... I don't know. I like to say it's human.
Right. Exactly. Humor's that one thing that it's a powerful thing to use because it's emotion. Because when you look at these commercials, the ones you remember are the ones that they make you laugh, they make you feel good, they make you cry, they make you do something versus wah, 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 wah.
Yep.
Buy this. No, I don't. So
right.
For example, the best time if someone's looking for inspiration and how you can leverage humor or you can leverage emotions in any type of advertising, look at Super Bowl commercials.
Yes, totally.
Because you think about it, they spend millions of dollars just for the 30 seconds, and then they spend millions more developing the commercial. So they have to get this right very quickly. Mm-hmm. And so the ones that do the best, they're very compelling. And sometimes you're watching the commercial, you're laughing, and you're wondering, what in the world is this about? And they finally tell you at the end of it.
Exactly.
And then you remember it. But sometimes you remember the commercial more oh yeah, the XYZ company produced this. You really don't think about the product, but you remember who they are because of it.
Exactly. And one other thing I would add to that is being provocative. One story that I always remember, and in my research I found this about a year ago, where there was a remake of the film Carrie, and it was about to launch in 2013. Mm-hmm. And part of their campaign was to set up an elaborate prank at a New York City coffee shop, which they filmed. So you can imagine how provocative this was if you know the movie Carrie. And if you don't, Google it. But basically this video spread on social media like wildfire. Mm-hmm. Fire, not flour. They tapped into this curiosity and shock of the people in the cafe and the people who watched the video.
Right.
It's crazy to think about how, you don't necessarily need something to go completely viral unless, you're a little bigger and a little more established, but you don't have to get that provocative. But the idea here is that you don't want to always play it safe. You don't want that to be the default because you see it every day on social media. Most people play it safe, are boring, and kind of just do the same thing. So the idea is that it's important to be different and kind of show your opinion in a way, take a stand, ignite some kind of emotion.
Right. And that's extremely powerful. It's that you have to be willing to step outside of the proverbial safe box if you want to be noticed. Because if you think about the amount of posts that are going on, you think about Twitter, of how many tweets are going on per minute. So if you start following more than a handful of people, unless you're using some type of a tool to filter the feed, it is just this onslaught, like you can't read it.
Right.
And then you look at Facebook. Without the algorithm in place, once you have the same thing, once you have beyond a few friends, you would never keep up with stuff. So it's important to understand if you're going to have a message that's going to resonate, you have to be willing to step outside of the safe box so it's noticed and people think, ooh, what's that versus, whatever.
Yeah, and it's a hard thing to do. There's a lot of people who, because you obviously don't want to offend people. You don't want people, or the other side of it is, for me at least, to be completely honest, when I first started doing this, I would get people who I didn't even know make comments on it that just were not mean, but just questioning me. Mm-hmm. And right. I had to be ready. And not that I wanted to go to war with people. I could clearly ignore it. But you have to be confident enough in yourself and your message and your business to step up if questioned. You know what I mean?
Right. Now, you mentioned that, and it's something that no matter who you are in marketing, the moment you put yourself out there, the haters are going to start hating.
Oh, yeah.
For some reason, I think there's like a job description out there that says, what are you going to do? I'm going to hate on people 24/7. Right. You're hired.
Totally.
But how do you go about responding to them? Because some people, that becomes a stopping point, is that they have this fear, but what if someone says something I don't like? It's going to happen. So how did you get past it? And how do you help people prepare for the inevitable hater?
Yeah, well, I was lucky enough, again, to be in corporate for that many years. I had to develop thick skin. It was not a good environment, and I was in marketing there also. So I had opinions that people, 70-year-olds with suits who, been there for years were like, no. And at first I'd go home and cry. I'm like, oh my God, I didn't like what I had to say. So I learned how to have a little bit of thick skin and not care. But it's easy to say, don't care what somebody says. Of course we care. Of course we want to be liked. It's part of human nature is we want to be loved and liked. So what I would say is play around small with it. And know that the haters have they have issues. They're not happy in their life. Their goal, the only way they can get happy is by putting other people down. And, it's not just going to be on social media. This is every aspect of our life. I mean, this is stuff that I have to go over with my kids, the bullies and this and that. There's online bullies, and it's horrible. And people just try to put other people down for fun. And there has to be a separation. I mean, it does make it easier that you don't see these people and you don't know who they are. So you could delete their post or their comment. You could respond to it and start a war, or you could just smile and move on and be like, that is your opinion. I respect your opinion, even though I don't even know you. And I'm going to move on with my life because it has no relevance to me and it does not affect me. But it's hard. It's hard. It's not easy, and it's a process.
Oh, no, it's never easy if you think about it, because naturally when we do something, we want everybody to like us. And then when someone doesn't, you're like, but why don't they like me?
I know.
I'm like, you get used to it. Like you say, you have to develop the thick skin. However, it does bring about where you have the issue with people saying negative things online. And I was thinking about this the other day, and I thought, there's so many people that say hateful remarks online because there's this safety net for them, that the computer's in front of them, that the vast majority of things they say, so many of them would never attempt to do it in person, because now there's a physical interaction, and it might not go well, where they can say something online and like, oh, it's no remorse because there's not a physical connection, versus, if they say to someone, oh, go off yourself or whatever, to someone in person, the likelihood of them saying that drops dramatically.
Oh, yeah.
Because there's anonymity is gone. There's now a physical presence, and also depending on who you say it to, there might be a physical response. So.
Right, right. You should be careful, but there's those people. It's
right.
It's awful, but it happens. So yeah, it's starting small. It's trying to just do it despite of anybody else, being so confident in yourself and your message. And it's, it goes back to how we even started this conversation about personal development.
Right.
Like constantly getting to know yourself and be comfortable in your skin.
Right. And that's so vital. And ultimately, this is where by growing internally, you start attracting more and more people to you through the process, because it goes back to the expression, like attracts like. So if you put out the energy, the vibes that you want to be around certain groups of people, you're going to start getting the introductions to them, which makes a world of a difference. You're going to start go to the places where these people are, and you're going to start doing the steps necessary to be around that type of environment 24/7 versus kind of just hanging out in the bleachers somewhere. You got to actually move up to the big leagues.
Right. Yeah. And it's a choice.
Right. Everything's always a choice. So now, with everything we've discussed today, what is one thing that someone who's wanting to build their brand, they absolutely need to focus on right now?
Oh, the one thing.
Oh, yes. One.
All right. I don't know. Okay. I could give you one exercise that I think is super, super, super important that I would like to share, because this kind of sums up everything I've been talking about in terms of the knowing yourself. So it's your funeral, okay? It's not as morbid as it sounds, but this exercise will bring up it will bring up everything that I want to convey. So this exercise, I do want to say, was introduced to me by one of my mentors, Dan Meredith, and I kind of put my own spin on this. But I love this exercise, and I have so many of my clients do this. Okay, your funeral, you're dead, everyone is there. The first thing I would say is, what do they say about you? Second thing, so you could jot this down or come back to it. What was the legacy you left? And then what words were spoken about you over drinks? And it could be the same second part of that question is, what do they say about you now that you can no longer hear? This was huge. Like, what is that? Or that girl owes me $10, or, she never paid me back, or she bit off more than she could chew. She never followed through, whatever those things are. Again, This is not a fun exercise, but it brings a lot of insight. And then I guess the last one would be, what stories are told as the night unfolds?
Very interesting.
Yeah, it really is. This is all about getting you to understand yourself on a deeper level. What is that? The biggest one for me is the legacy piece, because, you die today or tomorrow. What's there? What did you leave? And it makes you to really think, like, what if I haven't done that yet? How can I do that now? What can I do now to kind of leave this legacy that I want?
Right. Exactly. It's something that's so critical that we don't think about on an ongoing basis. It's what is it that people are going to say when we're not there? Because sometimes they think everybody's going to say positive things. But if you don't give them that incentive, well, yikes, that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
So it's just the way it goes. Of you have to, every action you take, whatever you're doing in front of the public and not in front of the public, does that resonate with that message that you want people to convey when you're not around? Exactly.
And it's not just for business, right? It's every aspect of your life.
Right. Exactly. So now, how can people learn more about you and what you have to offer?
Yeah, so I do one-on-one coaching, and I do it 4 months, and it's very, very powerful. I also do a 1 month, once a week coaching package. And then most of my time, when I'm not spending it with one-on-one clients, I spend in my Facebook group. So that's 4th floor to the penthouse. And it's really fun. And we talk about mostly strategy all day long, like how to increase social media traffic through personal marketing, personality-based marketing and branding. And it's fun. It has some really cool people in it. I'd love for you guys to come hang out.
Okay, and is there a link for it?
Yes, can we put it in the show notes? It's
definitely.
Yeah, it's 4th floor to the penthouse.
Okay, perfect.
And then my website to learn more about me and how to work with me is andiwickman.com.
Oh, excellent. That is perfect. So I want to thank you, Andi, for coming on to the Big Movement podcast today and sharing your wisdom on how you can be able to leverage your personality and really develop a marketing strategy to connect with your ideal clients.
Yes, thank you. It's been such a fun time. I love this. This is great.
Thanks for listening to the Big Movement Podcast today. And be sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Now that you've surely been inspired to take your entrepreneurial career and business to the next level, you can stop by the website and get more. And if you're ready to boost your business brand, be sure to grab your free report, 7 Easy Steps to Build Your Brand Today.